On a normal day, shoppers were greeted at an upscale grocery store in Menlo Park with jam samples, but this was no ordinary sampling. Unbeknownst to the people walking in, they were part of a study. In one instance, shoppers were presented with 24 jams to try, along with receiving a discount coupon to use to purchase, while another group was offered to try only 6 jams and a coupon as well. The difference in behavior was staggering. We saw that 60% of the people that walked by stopped at the larger selection, while only 40% stopped at the smaller selection. The larger selection was more attractive, but when it came to purchasing, it was a different story. After trying the jams, 3% of people purchased from the larger selection, while 30% purchased from the smaller selection. This study included 2 other experiments that explored this topic. Ultimately, what this paper points to is suggesting that there is regret about potentially making the wrong decision. Buyer's remorse comes in many different forms, and this is the famous example that gets frequently brought up in psychology and marketing discussions. Just ask yourself, what sort of analysis paralysis do you get when you try to pick a wine for dinner out of the 50 choices versus getting recommended one from the sommelier? This is a nice way to set up our discussion today, which is around avoiding buyer's remorse in DCS. Over the years, I have seen this discussion come up several times about people lamenting what they had purchased in DCS, but I have not really seen anyone talk about how to actually avoid buyer's remorse. So I thought that this would be an interesting topic to discuss. So today we talk about buyer's remorse in DCS, why it may happen, and what we are going to do to help curb it. If this is your first time here, this channel focuses on multiplayer sim gameplay. So if you're into that, please subscribe. Let's start with the painfully obvious one, which is to maximize fun. As the examples in the introduction suggested, people can feel buyer's remorse when they don't feel like they made the best choice. This is really a combination of wanting to min-max their enjoyment, and this translates really well into video games like DCS. After all, you are limited by having only 24 hours in a day, and you want to maximize your fun. So this really comes to a head when you have to wrestle with the menu of options when it comes to buying something in DCS. People all look at the same list of things, but what they actually focus on differs by the player. A player that spends the majority of their time on the Cold War server may see a narrower list. A player hungry to get into World War II will see something completely different, while a brand new player is overwhelmed by the amount of information and is entirely unsure of where to go. This is natural. It's a good thing. It really does highlight the wide era that DCS covers. This different point of view when looking at the DCS module list is important to understand because it does not make for a uniform path of progression for everyone. There are different tastes and different needs, and the decision-making process can suddenly get very complicated. My advice to people is to actually take a step back and not to think about the module so much, but rather think about your social circles. I personally prioritize how I play more so than what I play. As this channel is focused on multiplayer, I am sure a lot of you understand that a great game or a crappy game can be fun with the right people. It's the social aspect of playing online that really turns a fun hobby also into a semi-social hobby. DCS is not a monolith community. There is a wide variety of focuses and people play the game in a lot of different ways. The players organize themselves into communities. There are LARPers who roleplay things to be as realistic as possible. There are people who play World War II only, and there are people who do aerobatic shows. Thinking about your social circle and who you know will also naturally bring along the era that you are going to revolve around, and through extension, a more curated module list to pick from. Along with that, deciding between modern, Cold War, World War II, and the type of settings between PvP or PvE will surface up the people you can play with. These people are sometimes your best source of information for modules. They already have the experience with them. They will probably want to play with you, and they can help teach you the module. Making more module overlap with your social circle is a natural way to make sure you squeeze more enjoyment out of a module, and it cuts back on the type of buyer's remorse that leaves a bad taste in your mouth. It was something that I thought was really obvious, but reading through a lot of Discord discussions, it's clear to me now that it's not super obvious to everyone. Some people really get focused on the plane, but sometimes by doing that, you lose sight of the things outside of the cockpit that makes the time playing DCS a fun experience. To double click into this, let's make another comparison that I left out of the intro. Modern Romance by Aziz Ansari was a book that talked about dating now versus how it was back then. It has been years since I read this book, but it was an interesting one, and to summarize Really quickly, he worked with a researcher to look at the available dating pool of people in the first half of the 1900s. The amount of people who married each other, who grew up in the same apartment building, street or neighborhood was quite high, and their divorce rate was quite low. Now you compare it to modern day dating, where you have an unlimited amount of choice that is surfaced up with apps like Tinder. The normal thought is that more choice will lead to better results, but just as we saw with the first study, is that people want to avoid regret. They want to min-max their choice, and ultimately this leaves them feeling regretful with their choice. Just like the Jams, Ansari's book suggests that people want to avoid the feeling of settling, and they constantly search for more dates and more partners, and then they take longer to settle down with a partner, and the results are not as good as when there was more limited choice. As I was mulling over this topic in my head, I did find myself thinking about this book, and to me, it's an interesting thing to extrapolate over to this topic. If it's 100% applicable or not, can't ever be too sure, but if it is, then it does suggest that your immediate circle of gamer friends may really be your best source of information and inspiration to make module choices, and through them, you may find the best way to enjoy these modules and to avoid buyer's remorse. From my view, the biggest source of buyer's remorse has come out of things related to early access. This is a big topic, but I think that the best way to explain this one is to give you my personal example of feeling the most burned from the early access system, because it has left a bad taste in my mouth. In mid-July 2022, the Mirage F1 was released. This was a huge moment for the Cold War crowd. The entire Cold War scene had been revolving around the MiG-21, F5, and the Viggen for the longest time, and we were finally getting a new fixed-wing Cold War plane. Along with that, it was a pretty big moment for this channel because it was the first module we were given early access to, and I was able to make a video leading up to its launch. With the context of the excitement for the Cold War scene, the plane felt like it was naturally going to slip in to the game because at first glance it felt really good, and we knew it was going to get better. For example, the manual called out some things that were not immediately available at the initial launch, but the expectation was that it was going to come, so I was not really sweating the things that were not completely done. The thing is that as more time has gone by, the patience for the changes to come to the Mirage F1 has been getting replaced with a bit of remorse. Now, this project does get some credit. Argus really is pumping out the different variants of the plane. Within 2 years of that module being released, 3 variants have come out. That's incredible for DCS timing. The issue is that the entire project is really starting to get clouded by the lack of the radar modeling. The radar is on an island of its own compared to the other contemporary planes in its era, both the MiG-21 and the F5 model terrain clutter. The Mirage does not really do that. You point your antenna down and you can suddenly see everything. Some of you may be looking at this and may say, wait, there is clutter. Don't you see all the specks appearing? Look closely. The confetti is not real. It's just a video that basically loops. This means that this module's radar that was released in 2022 is not even up to the same standard as the MiG-21, which released in 2014, and the F5, which came out in 2016. This sucks, because this has been my biggest source of regret with this module. I thought a working radar that would be at the 2014 standard would have been done by now, but it hasn't happened yet. I'm sure Argus will get to it eventually, but I just wanted to lay this out because feeling some sort of regret around this module is reasonable. It has affected me so much that I don't even have this module bound anymore. Not because it's a bad module, it's not, but it's just because I'm busy. I really avoid trying to relearn things in this game, so now knowing the state of the radar, I want to wait until it's fleshed out before I rebind it, and I know I'm not the only one. The Mirage F1 and its FC3 radar has become a real problem in our Cold War community. It is one of the most contentious topics, and we have had to basically remove or limit the radar-based missiles. This thing is frequently cited as a meme with the most diehard Cold War people. It's not a good thing. Some unassuming person who doesn't know any better buys the module, gets on our server to play, and finds out that the radar-based missile on the plane basically doesn't really exist on the server because we have had to balance it out because the module is unfinished. This pisses people off, and it sets for buyer's remorse. So with this example out of the way, we can see how the unclear roadmap of an early access project can be a petri dish for buyer's remorse to fester. The module F1 is just my personal example, but all of you have examples. The F16 is probably the case study for DCS. Some other people might say the F14 because not all the variants are done yet. Early access is something that means a lot, but it also means nothing at the same time. The Viggen was released in 2017, and 7 years after the fact, it's still in early access. I'm not even sure why, because this module feels like it has been complete since they did the flight model changes a year or two ago. I don't even know what's missing anymore, and this now brings me to my next point. I actually don't really blame the module makers for this. I actually think a lot of the responsibility falls on ED. They are, after all, the ones that create and maintain this ecosystem. Standards are important. They should exist, and they should be enforced. It's sort of bewildering that with such a diverse set of module makers, that there isn't a standard list of requirements that lays out what an early access module should contain. If this is supposed to be the most realistic combat flight sim on the market, then why are there no standards between the modules? Things exist for some and not for others. This is not a particularly new topic. Jabbers did a wonderful video about the S16 4 years ago, and I'm just scratching the surface again on this topic today. Now, we haven't had a release as bad as the S16, and in general, ED has gotten better. But with that said, we still don't have a basic list of requirements and a general commitment or timeline of when a module will be finished. This is just a recipe for remorse to set in, and this could be avoided if standards were communicated and enforced. So this part is really just a watch out for players. Just know that when buying an early access module, it is a bit of kind of rolling the dice. And also a note to ED that you could help cut down on buyer's regret if things were a bit more standard in how modules are released in early access. If you wanted to buy a TV and it was November 1st, would you buy one? Hell no. Why? Black Friday sales come after Thanksgiving. Everyone knows this, and the consumer has been trained to wait out for those deals. DCS is not unique to this. I have seen some people new to the scene buy a module and then immediately find out that it has gone on sale again. This is even more true now, as ED has recently removed the 50% off first purchase offer. So how do we get around this and not pay too much for something that will immediately come on sale? I was actually really curious, and I went through the last 2 years of sales to see how often is DCS on sale. What I saw is that DCS was on sale for 142 days during 2023 and 96 days in 2022. In 2023, the maximum days between a sale was 70 days and the average was 45. That means if you wanted to buy a module today, but it was not on sale, you may need to only wait 45 to 70 days before you can buy at a discount. Additionally, retailers like to anniversary their sales. They want to make year-over-year comparisons. This is normal in the industry because it makes it easier to plan around a retail calendar. Looking at some of the major sales period between 2023 and 2022, it looks like ED is doing something like this. If you are curious when the next sale will hit DCS, go to the news section and go to the same time last year and click around until you see a sale. This is your best indication that a sale is coming. Again, DCS was on sale for 142 days, or about 40% of last year. This is one of the easiest forms of buyer's regret to avoid. With that said, it's not always on sale, so you should be prepared for your purchase. So this is a part of the video where I recommend to try the standalone install for DCS, because you get access to the DCS free trial system, which is a really neat system. It lets you try a module before you purchase it. As far as I know, this is not available to Steam users, and it really is a compelling reason to be on standalone. Additionally, this is a really niche scene. I spoke with a non-DCS developer about how much money Steam takes off every purchase, and I forget the exact number, but it was around 30 or 40%. So assuming this number is correct, you are basically sending a third of your money, not to ED, but to Valve for your purchase. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm a big fan of Steam and Valve. It's a great ecosystem, but at this point, the module makers and ED probably need the money more than Valve does. It is something to think on. DCS is a big game. There's a wide area of coverage, and where you make your next step in terms of a module is a big decision, and it can be a bit of a minefield for buyer's regret to pop up. A lot of people make buyer's guides. I have even done one myself, but this was a topic that I had never seen come up, so I wanted to start the discussion. Let me know what you thought, and if you agreed with my recommendations or if you have some of your own, please feel free to arm your fellow gamers in the comments below with how you get around avoiding buyer's regret. If you found this video interesting or helpful, let me know, and please help by subscribing. Thanks, and have a good one.
Yeah.